Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. This week my guest is Andrew Van Buren. We talk about the history of his family and the parallels with the inventor of circus Philip Astley, shyness, and possibly the most moving song sheet story you'll ever hear. So please, sit back and enjoy the Panto podcast. My guest for today's Panto podcast is Andrew Van Buren. Hello there, sir.
Hello.
And we've been chatting for hours.
Already? That's
Already?
Right. Yes.
So we're probably going to go over the same things that we've already been talking
That's
about.
okay.
But I've met your lovely family
Yeah.
and your dad as well. And
Yeah.
what was it like then growing up in the business?
Unique, really. I was very fortunate because my family isn't based just in theatre. My childhood was spent bouncing around all aspects of the business. So the first time I was on stage was at 6 weeks old in the Great Room Grosvenor House in Park Lane, London. My mum and dad were working there. They were regular performers in the West End. They did all the London banqueting scene. And so they worked for Sidney Lipton Orchestra there on a regular basis. Every week they were in and out of there. And they took me in at 6 weeks old. And then I kind of grew up with it being fairly normal, doing the show business thing for me. It wasn't, this is a unique lifestyle or something different. It was normal. It carried on that way up until the point where I occasionally went to school. And this one time I came back from school a little bit upset because the teacher had asked me, what have you been doing in the summer? And I came home, went to the school and said, I've been down at Elstree Studios and I've been spending time in the Muppet studio behind the scenes and the Muppet workshops, and I've seen them filming Sapphire and Steel with Joanna Lumley and David McCallum, and they're filming Empire Strikes Back there, and I've been on the Dagobah set, and and all the kids and the teacher were, yeah, of course you have. And they didn't believe it.
No.
And that was a kind of reality check that, to the general public, let's say, this was a kind of unbelievable childhood that I was leading. But it was great because, I learned the business inside out. I learned behind the scenes. When we were doing the summer seasons through the 70s, one of my first jobs was pulling the tabs, closing the curtains and opening them. And I learned to do that. Little subtleties like the fact that the curtains, the tabs have to close on the last note of the music and things like that people don't realise that make it a bit special. Touring with my mum and dad and their Illusion show and appearing with the big names of the past in the theatres, it was a really, really good childhood. But as well as the theatres, we'd then work in the circus. So on one hand, I'd be doing the summer seasons, learning the skills of theatre and the etiquettes of theatre. And then on the other hand, the next month we may be working for a circus, which in them days, you could be there and they've got the lions, the tigers, the bears, etc.
Oh my.
And, yeah, so that's kind of the norm. And so, it was incredible, and also spending time on film sets and things like that. And I mean, the Muppet Studios were amazing. They were filming with Diana Ross at the time, and it was a really good childhood, but tough to kind of come back into the real world as a child from this kind of fantasy land of show business. But yeah, it was a fortunate childhood.
And what was it like then at school? Were you an academic?
I've always loved knowledge. I've always loved learning. I love reading. I've always been into art. I write now still, but the school education system wasn't for me. It didn't feel. The only way I can explain it is it felt like you had to be a certain type of character. Everybody had to fit into the same shape, the same position. Everyone had to have the same way of learning. And for me, that wasn't right. It felt like I was having my wings clipped whenever I came home. Little things like when we were touring places like Sweden with Circus Svensson, which was an incredible season. We toured during the winter. So when we got up to the north of Sweden, it was 34 degrees below freezing. It was really cold. But it was a different cold. It was a dry cold. The snow was dry, more like sawdust. And it's like you come home from that and then you go into a geography class where they're trying to teach you about sheep farming and icebergs and coal mining. And I've suddenly realised, but, most of the pupils in the class don't know where London is. They don't know which is north, south, east and west. And they don't know how to read a map, which, that was something I grew up with, travelling. You had to learn how to read a map in the days before sat-nav. So it felt very much stifling for me, the education system. And it kind of hit a point eventually. We just worked for Circus Asani in Chessington Zoo, and there was a Hungarian circus artist there who taught me trick riding of unicycles and trick riding two-wheel bikes. And it was a matter of, do I continue with my education or go into show business? And I went into show business. So, yeah, the education system I left behind. But I think education is very important, but not necessarily, it's not one thing fits all.
Do you remember then that first gig that you performed solo?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. My family background is magic and illusions, even though my mum and dad started in circus. My father started in circus with Gandhi's Circus way back in the late 40s, early 50s. It was one of those things where, well, you remember Windsor Davies and Donna Stell from It Ain't Our Fault Mum? Well, Windsor used to say to me as a kid, "You've got it made. You'll take over from your father and mother the magic." And this stuck with me. We're in summer season with them in 76 and 1977. When we were in Felixstowe in 76, the hot summer, Windsor often said, "You've got it made." And I wanted to do something different. And that's when the opportunity came up with Csaba Schlingoff, the Hungarian circus artist, to learn a different skill. It felt, this is it. I want to do my own act. I want to do something different to the magic. And that's when I started doing the unicycling and then eventually the juggling and the plate spinning. My first performance of my own solo act, separate to helping my mum and dad in their shows, was in 1981. And I was 11 years old. I performed at the Mitchell Theatre. And from that, I got a contract working in some nightclubs. And then I realised I needed to get from A to B. So I employed my first assistant when I was 12. And she used to drive me to the gigs and then assist me in the act. And it kind of went on from there, really. It was one of those wonderful things that just kind of developed and evolved as it went along. And I became known as a unicycling, juggling performer. And then eventually the plate spinning came in. But then people wanted a second spot. So I had to then go back to the family trade of the magic and the illusions and start doing all of that as well. So I kind of came up with a at the time, very unique package of mixing the magic and illusions with the circus skills and putting it all together in the melting pot as almost like a one-man plus assistant variety act. So, yeah, it was an exciting time.
What was it like then with mum and dad when you weren't on stage?
The summer seasons were great. I used to love the summer seasons because, I'd go to school in the different towns that we were in, the seaside resorts like Weston-super-Mare. Went to school in a place called Limpsham. And it was great because the summers seemed to be hotter back then, and you'd have all day free to go and see things and do things, and then go down to the theatre at night. Being as we're Spesh Act based, it's props, so we'd usually be one of the first into the theatre, and I'd help assist my mum and dad putting the props ready for the show and getting everything ready. And then it was really good, really travelling. It was just the normal way for me. It was just normal. I hadn't anything else to kind of compare it to, Do
you get your daughter to help you out now?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, she's 5 years old, my little girl is, and Harley, she loves dancing. But it's difficult now because the world is a very different world. there seems to be a lot more dangers out there, for instance. I mean, I used to just take myself off from the pier and go down and play on the beach on my own at a young age, whereas now I think it's a little bit more, you'd be more cautious about letting a child do that nowadays. Whenever possible, we take Harley with us, but she does love her dancing. We don't want to force her into show business. We want her to do what she wants to do. But it'd be quite good if she did go into the business, because it's kind of keeping the dynasty going. But I just want her to do what she wants to do. And if we can teach her all the skills, like the juggling and the rolling globe and the magic and everything, at least she's got the skills, then she's got the choice.
The name then, Van Buren, is that the real name of the family?
Well, it's a funny story with the Van Buren name as it came along, because my mum and dad actually originally worked as the Amazing Yoxanis. So if you look at the show programs and posters from like the 1960s, 1961 really, backwards through the 1950s, then it was always the Amazing Yoxanis. And they did really well for themselves. They were working some good work. They did well with the Manchester clubs, and they were working in circus. They were working some theatre shows. At one point they were second top to Jimmy James, the comedy act who did the box routine. But they could never get the Moss Empire #1 circuit. And at the time their manager was Don Ross and Pauline Marks. And Pauline Marks was auntie to Joan and Jackie Collins, and Don Ross was married to Gertie Katana, the music hall singer, and one of the creators of the British Music Hall Society, one of the originators. And suddenly my mum and dad got a contract for Van Buren and Greta, and the contract was addressed to my dad, but the money was twice as much. It was a #1 Moss Empire Circuit theatre tour with the singer Dorothy Squires, who'd just broken up with Roger Moore, the actor, so the atmosphere was a nightmare at the time. And yeah, so my dad phoned Dorothy and said, "You've put someone else's contract in my envelope." And she said, "No, that's you. We've christened you now. You're no longer going to be the Amazing Yoxanis. You're now a Dutch act. You're Van Buren and Greta." And it's like, we want you to work with pidgin English. We want you to work silent when possible, because you're Dutch. Whereas your accent, originally from Sandbach, it's not really what's wanted, because in those days you got the likes of David Nixon with the kind of plum in the mouth correct English. So this kind of northern accent didn't really work at the time. I mean, nowadays accents are embraced, whereas back then they weren't. So that was it. Overnight my mum and dad became Van Buren and Greta, and they suddenly became Dutch. And it's been a really good name for us ever since, and I've just always grown up as Andrew Van Buren, so I've stuck with it, and I'd say most people know me as Van Buren.
Bit like one of these people with the single name, like Kylie. Beyonce,
yeah, Madonna, yeah,
Lulu.
Yeah. This is the thing, it's. I mean, a lot of people were having the names changed that day, I mean, back then, you got like Jerry Dorsey changed to Engelbert Humperdinck. I mean, wouldn't you have loved to be in that meeting when they came up with the name? I mean, Engelbert Humperdinck was actually a composer, I believe, that the name was taken from. But who in the right mind would think that's, Jerry Dorsey? No, let's call him Engelbert Humperdinck. So everyone was having the names changed at that time. And even though my mum and dad weren't happy about it, it's been a lucky name for them, so we've stuck with it. And I do feel that I'm more Andrew Van Buren than anything else, so yeah.
What was your first experience then with pantomime?
Pantomime, the first one I was in was when I guess I was a latecomer really. The first one I was in was Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And that was when I was about 13 years old. And I was the special act in the circus scene. And that was great. It was a great grounding. From that, I started doing theatre work. Started doing theatre tours. My first proper theatre tour was with a guy called Roy Rowland, who was the understudy of Old Mother Riley. He kind of understudied Arthur Lucan in that role. So I toured with the Old Mother Riley show. And then we did a few other pantos as the act. But I always kind of classed my first proper panto as when I was playing a part. And it was Cinderella. It was at the Rotherham Civic Theatre. And it was really good. It was with Clinton Ford, the singer. Steve Barclay was Buttons. And two really good ugly sisters, Gina and Curly. Gina Millington and Curly Carter, who uniquely were a man and wife team. So it was a female and a male ugly sisters. And it was great because she was a dancer and she was quite tall, but Curly was a northern comedian who was quite short and stocky. So the two of them played really well against each other. And I ended up doing a lot of pantos with Gina and Curly, funny enough. But that was great. I played the bailiff, the bad guy in it. And it was a good learning curve, getting into learning the script and also doing other things like taking part in the ghost gag. And just little things like that it was a really good learning curve. That was for Dougie Chapman. And from that point on, most of my pantomime experience was for Dougie Chapman Associates, who we'd known for a good many years. And the nice thing with Cinderella is my plate spinning routine, which, I mean, the plate spinning more or less died off in the 1980s. There used to be a guy called Wolfgang Barschelli, who was the famous plate spinner. He did all like the Generation Game on the TV in the 70s and everything. And then after him, a few tried to copy it, and it kind of started dying as an art form, as a skill. And I'm a great believer in ethics. So Wolfgang sadly had a stroke. He wasn't well. He stopped doing the plate spinning, and I met him a few times and we corresponded, and I asked if he would give me his blessing to take up the plate spinning. And he gave my blessing, and I kind of took it on from there and went into the game shows with it and everything. And the nice thing is, not only did it open up the TV work, but it meant that in pantomime, in the ballroom scene, when everyone's coming down and it's leading up to the midnight striking of the clock, everyone could leave the ballroom because dinner was served. I would make the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, please, dinner is served, and everyone would leave the stage, and I'd do the plate spinning, which fit really nicely. And then at the end of it, the mace would be thrown back to me. I'd bang it and say, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, take your partners for the last waltz. And that was the lead into the clock strikes midnight. So that fit really nicely. And then the other one that we fit in nicely was Aladdin, which we would do the magic in Aladdin. Again, we did quite a few for Dougie Chapman. And then we did, there was three quite unique pantos we've done separately. The nice one with Aladdin was for Ian Liston, Hiss and Boo Music Hall. And Roy Hood, who was a great long-standing friend of ours and my proposer into the Grand Order of Water Rats, Roy contacted me and Ian contacted me and he said, look, we want to book you for Panto. We're going to send you this year's script. Can you look at it? And for next year, work out where you could fit something of yours in. And then we'll choose what we want. So I said, yeah, no problem at all. So I looked at it and it was Aladdin. And it was going to be at Lichfield Garrick with Jimmy Cricket. And I went through the previous year's script, which was still running at the time. That year's Panto was on. So this was for the following year. And it was like, oh yeah, the marketplace of Old Peking, where I could be a street juggler there, and Jimmy makes his appearance here. Yeah, I could do a prop where he appears out of it there, and then if I'm playing the genie, then we could do a scene in the cave, and we could do a scene, and I'd put all these ideas down for all these different sequences for them to choose from, even down to the finale. A walk down finale where I could produce all flowers and streamers and umbrellas, parasols for all of the cast. And Ian came back to me and said, I've talked with Roy and we love it. Yes. And I said, what do you mean, yes? They said, we want it all. I was like, oh no.
You made yourself some work there, didn't you?
Yeah. So literally all the way through the panto, we were on doing all these different things all of the way through. And we had so many props there. It was unbelievable. But it was really, really good. It was hard graft, but it just fit beautifully. And it really made it magical. You know, there was magic all the way through. So that was beautiful. Another quite unique panto that we did, one of the more recent pantos, was at Hinckley Concordia, which the Hinckley Concordia, Leicestershire, is an amateur-run theatre. And they put their own pantomime on. But it's one of the most professional pantomimes I've ever been in. And what they used to do is they'd book a professional act or performer to come in. And the great thing with it is it's a theatre that they own. And they've built up so that generation after generation are involved with this theatre. And now the younger generations that have come along, one of them is Kudos's head of lighting. Another one that does all the costumes now hires costumes to other pantomime companies. And so even though most of the cast are amateur, they have a live band and they have a pro come in and take part in it. And we did Umpty Dumpty there, which I thought, I've never seen Umpty Dumpty. I mean, it's an old pantomime. How do you turn it into a story? And they did a great job of it. The scenery was incredible. The costuming was incredible. The dedication of the cast was beautiful. And again, it was one of those where I played the Knave of Hearts and Alison would play the character in it, and we came on and did all these different sequences throughout. And then for the song sheet, I took the song sheet. But we didn't do it as a song sheet. I worked a magic effect with 4 children. And it worked beautifully because it was just completely brand new. And the effect I did was all performed by the children. And there was a lot of comedy elements. And it's a routine that I already did in my show, but I adapted it for the panto. And it just made the song sheet something completely brand new. So that was really great. And the other unique sort of pantomime, although it was more of a play, was Aladdin. And that was in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. And it's the next emirate to Dubai. And what happened was the sheikh, his eldest daughter, went to Venice on holiday. And she came home and said, "Daddy, I want Venice." So we built a replica of Venice in the desert. And they dug a canal that came in. And you got like the Doge's Palace there and a mini Rialto Bridge. And beautiful, beautiful. All the shops and the cafes. Ghost town. No one came to it. So then they got in touch with the company that provided the London Eye. How much to buy one, how much to hire one, how much to buy the company. And they ended up with the Eye of the Emirates. A big wheel there, just like the London Eye. No one came. And then going back to my family's origins in show business, a man called Bob Gandy was the man that started my father in show business. And my dad grew up with his son Joe Gandy, and then I grew up with his son Philip Gandy. And they are basically the world's second biggest circus-based entertainment provider. They own the Chinese State Circus, the Ladyboys of Bangkok. They've got umpteen different shows, and the next one behind Le Cirque du Soleil. So we've done a lot together over the years with the family connection, and any of my Middle East work has always been with the Gandhis. So they heard about Sharjah, there was a contact and discussion, and we came up with this idea of theming a show, circus show, in a circus tent around the story of Aladdin. But it was Aladdin, the Arabian Nights, as opposed to just the Aladdin story. So we had Scheherazade, the storyteller, telling the various stories to her husband, the king, because if she ran out of stories, she'd be beheaded. And we created this story. It was all scripted and then translated into Arabic. So we worked to an Arabic voiceover that narrated the story. So all of the cast had to learn the cues in Arabic. We again slotted all of the magic and illusions in. All of the cast were circus performers. So you've got all these different characters. You've got Aladdin in there, who was an Arab acrobat from Morocco. You've got the Moroccan acrobats. You've got a Chinese troupe of performers. There was Chico, whose bill matter was Chico, Aladdin's best friend, but a very good Muslim. So that was his bill matter for it. And then Alison played the princess. We had Abanazar in there. All of the cast were from all over the world. The dancers were ex-Bolshoi ballerinas, so they were the creme de la creme. And we put this tented story of Aladdin into Sharjah. And that was an incredible experience. I mean, we did 3 months over there with that. Massive tent. I mean, the opening night was mind-blowing because the Sheikh was coming in to see the show. And if the Sheikh liked the show, you could run. If he didn't like it, you pack up tomorrow and go home. That's it. And we suddenly found out that the security was incredibly tight because of the Sheikh coming, and we met the head of security, who was a big Canadian accented Arab guy who, you know, he was the guy with no weaponry, but you could see he got bullet holes in him and stab wounds, and he was the head of security, you know, massive. We suddenly found out that there were snipers on the buildings that were making sure that security was safe for the Sheikh to come and his entourage. And one of the effects that we did in that show, I played the genie, and Alison as the princess. One of the things she did was disappear in the middle of the ring, but then reappear at the back of the tent and come through the audience into the ring. So for that, she obviously had to run around the tent as quick as she could. It was 10 minutes before the show we found out the sniper's orders were, if you see anybody running, shoot them. So it's like, oh my God. So we're having this rushed meeting with them saying, you see this lady dressed as a princess, she will run around the tent, shoot. It's like, yeah, someone shoots. You know, no, you don't shoot. She runs, you do not shoot. And so you can imagine the show going up at this. And we've been told that the Sheikh will only stay for about 10 minutes. And then he will get up. And it's no insult. It's just if he likes the show, you get the nod and everyone will leave. So we coordinated, Philip Gandy and Tony Wilkie Miller and myself and everyone had put together a potted 10-minute version of the show for the Sheikh. So the script made no sense whatsoever, but it would look pretty for the prince. We went in, we did the effect, Alison reappeared, there was no gunshots, so that was a weight off her mind. I mean, she ran very fast that night. And we hit 10 minutes and the Sheikh stayed. And it was like, oh my God, what do we do? So sudden mad panic of put this on next, put that on next. And he stayed for 25 minutes and then nodded and stood up and left. And everybody left at the same time. 400 people left. And we got the go-ahead to run. And that was it. We went back the next day to the normal scripted show. And we ran for 3 months over there. And that's one of the happiest seasons we've ever had. I mean, the entire cast, 2 English people, myself and Alison. The rest of the company were Russian, Moroccan, Mexican, Chinese, and a Dutch company manager. It was just wonderful.
It sounds wonderful. What's it like then when you're actually working with so many different nationalities?
It's great. I mean, I think what helps me with that is the fact that I grew up in all the different environments. So you've got the theatre environment, but also the circus environment. Although I rarely work circus, most of my work is outdoor events, corporate events and television. It's nice dipping my toe back into circus because there's no boundaries. It's an entertainment form in various formats that is for everybody. So it's all inclusive, and also the performers are all inclusive. It doesn't matter what nationality you are, what language you speak, what your beliefs are, everybody works together like a big family, and you are like a big family. So it was really nice, and also it's great fun learning about different people's cultures, and also everyone has something new to bring into that environment, and that works really nicely. And the way different performers work and perform, and little things, it's like when you're working abroad, you have to adapt to the audience as well. So it's like comedy. If you think just in the UK, northern comedy doesn't necessarily translate to the south, and the southern comedy doesn't translate to the north. It was always, in the old days, you got Max Miller for the southern set, and you got Frank Randall for the northern set, and you transport them to the either end of the country, it wouldn't work. And it's similar. The circus performer can adapt in the tempo that you work and the tempo you perform, and little things. It's like in the old theatre tradition of enter from stage right and exit stage left, and always, the fairy princess and the good side is stage right and the evil side is stage left. So when you're working in the Middle East, it kind of works the opposite way. I think it's because of them being brought up reading the other way, and just things working the other way. It kind of, for the audience reads the performance the opposite way round, and the audience reactions are at different points in time. So if you perform an illusion that's a dissection effect, then you get the sheer horror for the audience of, oh my god, she's been cut up. It's not a kind of, oh, that's clever, But then when you relieve the tension by letting the person out of the prop, you don't get the applause of, oh, that was clever, that was good. You get the sigh of relief applause of, oh, she's alive. So it is a very different attitude out there to it.
I'm looking around. We're actually in your warehouse.
Yeah.
Workshop. Would I be correct in saying could be something of a hoarder?
Yeah, we never part with anything. I mean, I just love the history of the business. I love comedy, I love theatre, I love circus, I love fairground, and I've worked in all aspects of the business, from the cruise ships to the TV, and I guess I kind of like my souvenirs. And I love preserving the history. That's why I love these podcasts, because it's preserving the history. And so, yeah, looking around the room that we're in now, which is, I guess, quite a big room. My Victorian show is over at one side with the time machine and the Victorian fairground organ at the back there. And, we've got a set of crazy mirrors, all the flight cases. We've got, I don't know how many flight cases over the years we've built up. I think at last count we were pushing 50 odd flight cases. The other storerooms have got loads of flight cases in and that. But I just think it's important. I mean, some of the old illusions and props that I've got, it's not just about hoarding the props, it's keeping the stories alive. It's the stories that are around these props, like Houdini's vanishing oil lamp that we've got over here in a flight case, and the story of that. I've got props from the great illusionist Edgar Benyon that most people have never heard of, and it's just, I've got his last existing prop, and that's just, there's something magical about that, and my being able to tell a story of, this guy was Edgar Benyon, and this is his story, and this is his prop, and it's keeping it alive for future generations, hopefully my daughter as well.
Does magic still wow you?
The performance of magic does. The illusion side of things is what I've grown up with my mother and father touring illusion shows, and my touring illusion shows, and as a family of us inventing and building illusions, like our own vanishing motorbike rider surrounded, and a lot of the big effects like that. We like to come up with new illusions, and quite often we'll take old illusions and turn them into a new effect, or take a principle and turn it on its head to make something new. So really, the illusion side I know inside out. So it's rare that a prop won't come on and I can't instantly go, oh yeah, this is there and that's there and this. So it's more about the performance for me. I get blown away with some of the kind of small close-up effects, because that's not my thing. I didn't specialise in learning that. My thing was the big stuff and the circus skills, like the plate spinning and everything, and weaving it together and putting a story around it all, and just kind of making it into something magical with the story. So for me, seeing a performer doing a performance that has got some thought to it, or a storyline, a narrative there, the way effects may be put together, that's the magic for me. One of my favourites was a guy called Harry Blackstone Jr., and his father was Harry Blackstone, and they were famous for an effect, the floating light bulb, and he used to beautifully have this light bulb brought on in the light holder, and he would unscrew it and it would flicker off and then come back on once he'd taken the bulb out, and the music was just beautiful. And then he would hold it and burn his finger on it because it was a hot bulb, and he would look at his finger and the reflex would be to rub his finger, and at that moment he's let go of the bulb, but then realised and caught it again, and oh no, it floated. And just that beautiful build up of the reason that he suddenly discovered it could float, and then he would float it, and then he would put the ring around it, and then he would look at the audience and say, you want to see it where you can look but don't touch, and then it would float out over the audience's heads and lower down in front of somebody, and then float back up and then come back to him, and the music would rise and just come to a crescendo as it came towards him and he caught it. The theatrics of that was magic. And so nowadays people seem so hung up on how it's been done that they miss the beauty of the effect. And I think that's a great loss for the public. You have like the mass magician on there, and you go on the internet and you watch someone do something. This is why I avoid, in all my TV appearances, I avoid performing magic on TV, because somebody somewhere around the world will think it's a great idea to work it out and do how they think it's done and expose it. And I think that's a great shame, because the world's losing the magic. What's next? An exposure of, how Father Christmas makes his deliveries and what happens with the Tooth Fairy, and, where's the magic going to be left in the world? And so for me, it's not the way the effect is done, it's the way it's performed. That's the magic for me.
Do you remember the first magic trick that you saw your parents perform?
Yeah, the first effect I remember my mum and dad working was the vanishing radio. And I think I remember it because of the music. And even now, if I hear certain pieces of music, it takes me straight back to my very, very early years of touring with my mum and dad. And I mean, my father, I've had a couple of gentlemen's agreement with performers, because I'm a great believer in ethics, and I'm a believer in people doing their own thing. And okay, you can buy effects off the shelf, but perform them your own way. And I think it's a shame when you get carbon copies of acts. It's a problem I've encountered. So there's illusionists out there. I was working, I was one of the busiest and most prolific theatre performers of magic at one point in time, along with another act called Sapphire. And we had a kind of unwritten rule that we wouldn't tread on each other's toes. Our effects, presentation style, and the way we worked was very different. And it was great because it meant we could both work on the same shows. And it was the same for my father. In the 60s, my mum and dad cleaned up on the London banqueting scene. By then, their manager was a guy called Albert Savine, who was a ventriloquist with Daisy May. And they had their own radio show and everything. But my mum and dad were in the London circuit with a magician called Bob Harbin, who was famous for inventing the zigzag girl illusion, where the middle slides across. And he was also famous for his TV appearances with his origami paper folding. There was Billy McComb, there was Harold Taylor, there was this little close-knit group of performers that could follow each other in because they were all different to each other. And Robert Harbin had a vanishing radio that he used to, it was a little radio, he used to slip it into a box, put a lid on the front, take the lid off, and the radio had vanished. And my dad came up with a version where you had a radio on a table, you threw a cloth over it, lifted it off the table, the radio was playing, threw it into the air, and it vanished in mid-air. Catch the cloth, throw it on the table, the radio's gone. And Bob Harbin used to say to my dad, yours is better than mine, I will never work my vanishing radio ever again. And it's like my father never worked the zigzag lady illusion, although we've got the rights because Harbin published all of his ideas and secrets in a set of 500 books, which were all numbered. And it's beautiful because I've got number 6 of those books, and it's signed to me, Andrew Van Buren. I knew and admired your father and mother, from Robert Harbin, and that's number 6, which is beautiful, and that's just a beautiful thing of the ethics of the business. And that vanishing radio, it's an effect that my mum and dad regularly worked, and I still today, if I can, I've got an updated version of it that I still work, and that's kind of been a continuity for me from my mum and dad's early years through to my current performing. The other thing is the substitution trunk that I remember my mum and dad doing, which they kind of repopularized. In the 50s, it kind of died out. There was Les Levant performing a version of it as the $1,000 escape, but it was Houdini's Metamorphosis, and my mum and dad introduced the hoop of material around it because my mum and dad always worked surrounded when possible from their circus days. So all of the illusions that they came up with and that I come up with now and we build have to be performed surrounded. Like our vanishing motorbike and rider, my dad built to be performed surrounded, which is unique. It's the only one in the world. So with the substitution trunk, that was another beautiful effect that they worked. And at the time, in the 60s, they were the fastest they were. But then Peter Diamond came along, and the kind of commercial side of magic came along, where dealers came onto the scene and mass producing effects, and suddenly it became as there was another version of it out there, and other performers started to do it. But for me, they remained the kind of first effects. The first act I remember seeing was a guy called Fattini, and it was at the Blackpool Tower Circus. And he used to come on as a drunk character with a top hat and the sort of broken cigar that he was trying to light and he couldn't light. And he saw this very tall gas light, and it was too high for him. So he'd climb up the pole and open the glass side and light this cigar, then sit on top of this gas lamp that was probably, I don't know how tall, like 30 odd feet in the air, and it'd start to sway, and it'd be swaying even more eccentrically, and then he would be swaying over the heads of the audience, and then he'd start doing hand balancing on top of it, and handstands, and all these amazing things on it, and then at the end of it, slide down the pole. It was just a beautiful act that I remember that vividly from my childhood. Yeah, some of the memories are incredible from those early days.
And do you see acts like that coming up in the ranks now?
Acts are changing. The acts are still out there. I mean, there's a great cry from people saying that variety is dead, and it isn't. It's just changed. All the skills are still out there. It's just the venues have changed. It's like I went through a phase of performing in Spiegel tents quite often, which is like a circus tent but wooden walled, and the inside of the walls are cut glass mirrors. And they board it in, have a chandelier in the middle, and they can be sometimes very opulent. Spiegel tents can, and beautiful to perform in. And you're performing in the middle with like a round stage and a walkway to it. Very nice, and tables and chairs. The last one I performed in was in Nottingham, and before that I had my own show in Dubai for 3 months, which another magician friend of ours, Romany, she compared the show for us over there. That was a beautiful show. And you know, you come across these acts along the way that are taking, again, old principles and resurrecting them as new ideas. The acts are out there, and there's people coming up with brand new things or new ways of doing things. It's like the circus industry. You know, when you think, most people think of a circus as the wild animals, they think of it as a tent, and unfortunately quite often muddy fields. Whereas some of the shows, like Le Cirque du Soleil, they've taken the elements of opera, ballet, you know, grand spectacle and put it together, or they've themed it around like the Beatles or Michael Jackson. They've given it a narrative throughout. You know, there's new skills being found, or old skills resurrected and put in there. Then you've got shows that have come along the way, like Rah Rah Zoo. There's Archaeos. I mean, Circus Archaeos, where instead of the girl performing from the trapeze, she worked from the forks of a forklift truck. You know, instead of horses, they got motorbikes. You know, the clowns didn't have slapsticks to hit each other with. They chased each other with chainsaws. You know, it was the anarchic circus. So everything's still out there. It's just, it's in a different place. You've got jugglers that are juggling, you know, like the furniture, like Steve Rawlins. That is a skill that goes back, you know, to the turn of the last century. The skills are still out there, but they're not necessarily on a theatre stage. You know, they've moved into different realms because the theatre's now, the variety show, I think the variety show struggles now in this country because there's been this great thing of the top of the bill. Everything's been pinned on the top of the bill. And that was the celeb of the time. And quite often the celebrity would have been a radio star that before that was an act. They went from an act to going to radio, becoming a household name, going on to television. You know what they look like. Hey, they're appearing at the theatre. They're topping the bill of this show. Let's go and see them. You go and see the top of the bill. They've got an act because they were an act before they became a big name. The problem now is that the big names have never set foot on stage. They're names for being in reality TV. They're names for being chefs. So most of the new big names can't do anything on stage. They're just celebrities. And so you've got the last vestiges, really, of variety with the names like your Cannonballs, your Jimmy Crickets, etc., that have come through the mill, but I don't know who's going to replace them because the TV is a different medium. The viewing figures are watered down because there's so many channels. So I think that's had the impact on the variety stage show. And so the variety performers are still out there. It's just they've gone into different mediums, whether it's in the streets or whether it's in a Spiegel tent or whether it's a comedy club or whether it's a nightclub. Or they're still out there. It's like myself. I tour a big opulent Art Nouveau theatre that builds off the back of a lorry, and we do fetes and carnivals. We're still out there doing a Victorian theatre quality show, but outdoors. So the acts are still there. It's just you've got to look in different places for them.
Are there many other families that carry on the performing tradition?
Yes, there is other people that have family dynasties that are in show business and they follow in the parents' footsteps. But it seems to be more often now that you get this in the fairground and circus industry. There's quite often in the fairgrounds and circuses the families follow one generation after another. It's almost like a badge of honour how many generations they can go back in show business. Whereas in the theatre side, yeah, in the acting you quite often get it, but not so much with the speciality acts. It seems to be more of a rarity. There is a few. Jay Rawlins is following in his dad, Steve Rawlins' footsteps, and some great friends of mine, the Rollersons. I mean, Tommy Rollerson's a wonderful juggler. Lucy, she's a great dancer. They both do great comedy, and they're following in the footsteps of their parents, because Michelle teaches dance, ex-dancer, and also Sean is a great comedian. But I mean, the lovely thing there is the a really nice family and great friends of mine. So it's quite a kick when you can get to see the next generation come along, and you can actually help them a little bit as well and give them advice. And so, the Rollisons are a great example of that extra family dynasty rolling on into the next generation. And it's really nice to see that happening, and I'm quite proud of my heritage and the fact that I'm following in the parents' footsteps. I think it's important. I think it's really nice for both generations when that happens.
Is there anything that you've tried your hand at that you didn't quite master?
Yeah.
And would like to have mastered?
Oh yeah, life's too short, and there's not enough hours in the day, and not enough days in the week. I'm a bit of a workaholic, really. The thing that I love doing is my plate spinning, because it's a couple of things close to my heart. Because with living in the Potteries, the Stoke-on-Trent area, Newcastle-under-Lyme, not only have you got the circus connection with Philip Astley, the man who created the circus, being born in Newcastle-under-Lyme in 1742 and creating the circus in 1768, you've got the circus connection, you've got the pottery industry, so I can get the cheap plates, all the plates for the right price, and so it doesn't matter how many we break. So the thing I love the most is the plate spinning. I love doing the magic with the interplay with the audiences. I love taking that now to a different level where it's not me standing on stage performing at the audience. I like involving the audience, so I'm enjoying that. The things that I've tried along the way and not pursued for a while, I had a go at wire walking. A guy called Johnny Stafford, who worked as Beppo the Clown, who was an incredible, again, another forgotten performer, sadly. He worked with Bertram Mills Circus, but he started his career as a high diver with the Johnny Weissmuller show. Johnny Weissmuller was the original black and white TV Tarzan. He was an Olympic gold medalist swimmer. Johnny taught me the rolling globe, which we've got one just over at the side of you there, which I'm teaching my daughter.
Oh, goodness. No, I'm not going to have a go.
No, I started learning that. Johnny taught me that, but I never pursued that. And I had my Uncle Tom taught me the banjo and the ukulele. But then I started juggling, so that kind of went to the wayside. So there's all these different skills that I just wish I'd had enough time to keep all going, and I regret that I couldn't. But I always loved writing, I loved art, my drawing. I've not had enough time to keep my drawing going. I'm very fortunate because a lot of my friends are in the art world, from working on doing the drawing boards for films through to doing comics for the likes of Marvel Comics and DC Comics. They're professional comic artists, through to friends of mine being sculptors who do the grand life-size statues for town centres. I mean, a friend of mine, Andy Edwards, has done the Beatles walking down the street in Liverpool, and Denise Dutton has done like Ride a Cock Horse to Banbury Cross and some of the big statues of them. So I wish I could have pursued my artwork more, but you can't do everything. You just can't. So the juggling, the plate spinning, the magic, and the trick cycling were the key things for me. And yeah.
And recently you've had the Philip Astley
project
that you've been doing.
Yeah.
How obviously you come from this area.
Yeah.
So you've been quite lucky. Was that any sort of reason why the family moved to here, or?
It's funny. I mean, it's kind of a story I've kind of pieced together with a smattering of showmanship, let's say, because there's a coincidence in a way through everything. But I mean, Philip Astley was born in Newcastle-under-Lyme, 1742, became a military hero, joined the Royal Dragoons. He rescued the Duke of Brunswick from behind enemy lines, led an incredible military career, rescued horses that had gone overboard from ships, wrote a book on humane training methods, left the army, and then set up a riding school in London at Halfpenny Hatch. And it's there that he worked out you could get a horse up to an ideal gallop in a 42-foot diameter, which is a world standard for circus rings now. And this is again one of those people in history that, he changed the course of entertainment and influenced art, etc. When you think, the Greatest Showman film with Hugh Jackman, P.T. Barnum, none of that would have happened if it wasn't for Philip Astley coming up with the concept of the horse show and then introducing from the pantomimes the clown, like your Grimaldi style character, introducing then the jugglers from the marketplaces and all the other performers, and he created the circus. He was the first guy. All these skills existed before, but he's the man that put them together in the 42-foot ring. And he was forgotten. He was greatly forgotten. My father was born in Sandbach in the 1930s, and his love of circus came from when he was about 4 years old, being sent on an errand to the butcher's shop just up the road on Middlewich Road in Sandbach. And he came home from the errand and said, Mum, the butcher started selling elephant meat. And she's like, what? It's like, well, in the window there's the poster for the cow and for the beef, for the pig, for the pork, and for the lamb, for the sheep. But there's a poster with an elephant as well. He's like, no, that's a circus. So it's like, so he was taken along to see the circus. It was Chapman's circus on the Common in Sandbach, and then he fell in love with the circus. And then they went a little bit later, a couple of years later, he went to see an open air circus during the war years, and that was Gandhi's circus, and that's where he met Bob Gandy. And effectively, on his first chance, he ran away to join the circus. I mean, they used to go to the Blackpool Tower Circus on their holiday in September. So my dad's got vivid memories of the early 1930s, 1940s of the circus in Blackpool Tower, which is a beautiful building. And he then found out that Gandhi's circus were at Brereton, which is not far away. And during the war years, a lot of circus performers and variety artists moved to that area because it was avoiding the Manchester bombing, the Birmingham bombing. They were in the kind of Sandbach, Smallwood, Brereton area. So my dad grew up with all these old showmen in the 30s and 40s, like Radiana, the automaton that used to, the robot that shaved a man on stage. You got Lemo the lion, all these different characters from that time. And he learnt from the showman. That's where my dad first learnt about Philip Astley. And he learnt about Astley coming from Newcastle under Lyme, which was just down the road, a few miles down the road. Astley followed his father's career of becoming a cabinet maker, and so when my dad was dragged back to school and had learnt about Astley, then he read a circus book at school that had Astley in it, and he left school at 14, and his mum said, you can't keep messing about running away to the circus, you need a proper job, you need to do an apprenticeship. So he became a cabinet maker like his hero Astley. And then from Sandbach, he met my mum, which they say was love at first sight, but I think he also realised she was the right size to fit in the boxes. And they kind of, my dad at that time was doing clowning, he had a dog and monkey act, he was working the trapeze, but he also did magic, and he'd always put his own shows on, like concert party shows in Sandbach. And my mum said, I'm not going up on the trapeze, but I'll help you with the magic. And so they concentrated on the magic. They went down to London. They did really well down in London. I mean, at one point in time, they got a season then working in Clacton with Roy Hood in 1964, 65. And my dad got asked to go to a meeting in London Pavilion Chambers, to meet a big impresario producer. And they wouldn't tell him who it was. So he went along there and walked in, and it was Walt Disney sat there with Tom Arnold, who was the big show producer of the time. So you walk into a meeting with Tom Arnold and Walt Disney sitting there. And cutting a long story short, Disney wanted my dad to come up with ideas for Snow White on ice, which again is like a pantomime. It's Snow White, but on ice. And my dad came up with an idea that Disney liked of an illusion called the Creation, because Disney wanted fire to go with the ice. And also the scene with the apple where the witch is procuring the poisons. Disney didn't want the audience to think, and particularly the children, that magic was evil. So he created the role of the royal courtier magicians, the good magicians. That was my mum and dad. And the illusion my dad came up with was the world was a ball of fire, and my dad walked on with fire. Snuffed it out, it turned into flowers, which it was biblical. Next came the vegetation. And then from the vegetation, he put it on a pedestal, pulled a curtain round, and there was the human, the girl appeared, my mum. Disney loved the idea, and they worked the Empire Pool Wembley for 12 months, and then they did a tour with the Disney show, and they earned a lot of money with that. And then my dad said, you know, we need to invest in something with this money, else the taxman will just take it all. And my dad said, look, I build all these illusions, why don't we open up a DIY store? Then I've got all the equipment there, I can have my workshops and everything. And so they did that, and they couldn't find anywhere in Smallwood or Sandbach, and they found one in the Newcastle area, Silverdale. And so my dad ended up moving to Newcastle area. And so in a way, not totally by kind of control, but he did Astley's life in reverse. So from running away to the circus, he became a cabinet maker and then ended up living in Newcastle under Lyme, you know. So I grew up with all of this story. And in 1982, my dad suggested to the Carnival Committee of Newcastle Borough Council, why don't you theme your carnival on Astley? And the response was, who? Philip Astley. Never heard of him. And so they did a carnival in 1982 themed around Philip Astley. And then in 1991, my father and I commissioned a statue to be built. I funded it by Andy Edwards, one of my friends I mentioned earlier. And that was a life-size statue of Philip Astley. And 1992, we put on a series of events for the 250th anniversary of Astley's birth in Newcastle for the people, so that people learnt the story. And unfortunately, someone within the council saw it as a career move, and my father and I got pushed out, and it all ended up very horrible and never amounted to what it should have done. And then fast forward to 2009, I'd just been advising. My mum and dad retired. My dad retired in 96, and we'd just been advising the Royal Shakespeare Company on a production of Julius Caesar, an all-black presentation of it, which went to Russia. And I realised about Stratford-upon-Avon with Shakespeare. That's their key unique selling point. And having my show in the Spiegel tent in Dubai, they realised that the oil is going to run out. So tourism is the big investment. And so I came back in 2009 from that, and we did a 3-month world cruise working. And we wanted to spend more time at home. And Alison and I wanted to look at starting a family. And suddenly I thought, what a crazy idea about revisiting Astley. And it's then in 2009 I realised that 2018 would be the 250th anniversary of him starting the process of creating the circus. And so I started shouting about Astley. The Astley statue had been living in a shipping container at Gandhi's farm, so we got that out. And started touring the statue. It went to the Edinburgh Festival with Gandhi's circus. It went to Sheffield Fairground Archive Museum at the Sheffield University for 3 months. And it all sort of developed from there. And we created the Philip Astley Project, which I've been a director of for the last several years. And in 2018, it just went crazy. It just for the 250th anniversary, we had collaborations with people from unveiling a plaque. I unveiled in Monte Carlo with Prince Albert and Princess Stephanie and the royal family, which was amazing. Shows around the world celebrated Philip Astley. People suddenly knew about this little market town of Newcastle under Lyme that people didn't know about before. They all thought Newcastle was up north instead of here in the Midlands, you know, the other Newcastle. So it kind of developed from there, and it became amazing with plays. The New Vic Theatre put a play on about him, and it was just incredible, all these different things about this lost person in time.
And you and your family are holding the flame for him.
Yeah, keeping it going. I mean, I'm constantly, even today I've had a Zoom meeting because of COVID lockdown about ideas for it, and trying to persuade Newcastle Borough Council to realise that this is their unique selling point, which it's becoming embraced. And that's great because it opens up new opportunities, not only to teach a new generation skills, but also for me to push my ability further and the showmanship. I mean, it's allowed me to speak in the Houses of Commons and Westminster about Astley. It's allowed me to take the story around the world and put symposiums on and productions and such like, and go in even to schools and talk to the children about it. And it's an inspirational thing that this boy from humble beginnings went on to become a big military hero and created an art form that changed the world. You know, when you think of like the paintings of people like Toulouse-Lautrec, based on circus, Dame Laura Knight, Renoir, all have painted circus. People like Thackeray, Jane Austen, Dickens have all written about Astley. You think of the films like The Greatest Showman wouldn't exist without him. The circus fancy dress. There's so many things. Even like the Beatles with their Dr. Pepper album, and the in benefit of Mr. Kite. That's all based around Pablo Fank, who was the first coloured circus proprietor, which is a massive story. None of this would happen without Philip Astley. So it's pretty big and pretty sad that he's been written out of history, and so it's become quite a passion for me with that. But I also think it's a great springboard for other people that have been forgotten in history to then be brought back to life. The names that are being forgotten.
And circus has become cool once again, would you say?
Yeah, it has. But then again, I think all aspects of the business are gradually becoming cool because, my performances have become very retro. I've become, why not bring back the stereotype of the top hat and the tails for the magician, but make it steampunk and make it all about Victoriana, and theme and storyline it all around Victoriana. So my outdoor show is that. It's all about that. The music is Victorian. Everything is Victorian. But you've got that kind of tongue-in-cheekness with it, and you can make it, in hindsight, work. My cabaret performance has got a kind of 1950s feel to it. These things, the old stuff is now so new because it's not been seen. There's a whole generation that are unaware or only just discovering the likes of your Tommy Coopers. You turn the TV on, you've got your Morecambe and Weiss reruns still being shown. There's a generation never seen that. So it's brand new. And I'm talking to younger generations now and talking to them and showing them footage of acts. Like, I'll go talking to dance schools and performers of the future and talk to them and show them footage of acts like Ganjo Brothers and Janita with their Romance in Porcelain dance routine, which is incredible Adagio routine. The Nicholas Brothers with their incredible tap dancing routine. It's old-fashioned, but wow, when you watch it, it's cool. And the kids of today watch it and go, that's cool. It's old-fashioned, but it's coming back. So with circus, it's becoming cool. Tap dancing with acts and shows like Tap Dogs, they made tap dancing cool. River dance, these things are now becoming cool because it's new. You and I know it isn't. It's old as the hills. But maybe if you just up the tempo, it's like Variety, the variety show package. I think that's perfect for the 21st century because people's attention spans are becoming so short. Well, a good variety show is a series of acts doing 8 or 10 or 12 minutes. Perfect. You can't get bored of it. You know, if you don't like a juggler, on's a singer. Next is the dancers. You know, next is the dog act. It's perfect for the 21st century. It's just there's this stigma behind the word variety. And that's why it's having to evolve and rediscover itself.
Where do you get your confidence from?
Andrew Van Buren.
That was a very deep answer, wasn't it? No,
Yeah.
Have you ever suffered with shyness at all, or
Yeah,
stage fright?
I am shy. I'm a very, very quiet, unassuming, shy, quite private person. But then when I put the costume on and become Andrew Van Buren, he stands out there and conducts the audience of hundreds or thousands, and you know he's the governor, he's the boss, you know. So yeah, if I go to a party and I'm caught off guard and someone says, "Come on, do something," it's like cringing. It's just like, oh my god, and no, I'm not here for that capacity. I'm not that big gregarious character. I'm a very, very quiet and shy, unassuming person, and I like to think of myself as a gentle soul. But it's when I go on stage or on the performance area that the character comes out, and you've got to give the audience what they deserve. You know, the audience. You know, you've got to go out there and you've got to go out there and instantly give the audience confidence. They've got to have confidence in you that you are going to entertain them. You've got to be liked instantly. You've got to have likability. And then you've got to be almost like a conductor where you take the audience on this journey where there's highs and lows and shades and darkness and lightness, and you know, you take them on it. And if it's a tough audience, you've got to be like the lion tamer where you're taming the audience. It's you versus them, you know. And then at the end of it, it's almost like a kind of, you've got to be the romantic character where you leave the audience maybe in a way besotted or feeling an affection or a love for you as a performer. So, you know, you have to take on all these different roles as a performer, but you owe it to the audience. Without the audience, we're nothing, you know. So the confidence is that's your gift to the audience.
How long did it take you then to actually finally know Andrew Van Buren to be able to go, yes? How long from performing that first gig to?
Well, you never stop learning, do you? You know, I mean, it's like every show is different. No two shows are the same. I mean, I've been doing this a long time now, from that 6 weeks old, you know, in the Great Room Grosvenor House through to now. That's, you know, it's a long time. But there's performers that are far older than me that, you know, all of us are still learning. Or you might come up with a line that something happens, or you think that worked, or the timing. More so for me, the timing. There's an illusion that was created by Les Levant, the Belichia Beacon illusion in 1928, and I purchased this as part of. I bought an entire illusion show off an estate of an illusionist that had died. I took an Arctic and filled it and brought it home and just rescued it, basically. Some of it was beyond rescuing, you know, woodwormed, rotten, but I just felt that this show should not be burnt and destroyed. So I rescued it, paid for it, and gave the widow the money and brought it back, and there was things there that were trash, and there was things there that were just magical items. And this Belichia Beacon illusion, you know, there's no record of what the routine was. So I had to not only restore it to its former glory, but also work out the routine and how it worked and what the effect would be and what happened, not only mechanically and backstage, but for the audience, what happened, because there's no record. And so that was an amazing offstage journey, and I've got other effects I want to do this with. And then to work it on stage. And I've worked that effect now for about 5 years. and it's gone well. But there was one show last year in the middle of the summer, and just there was a couple of timing points where I moved a little bit faster, and at this point moved a little bit slower than normal and put a longer pause. And I don't know why, I just did. It was just the environment, the weather, and it clicked. After 5 years, that was the perfect timing for the effect. And so I've tried to recreate that every performance now. That is the staple of that effect. And it was just a heartbeat here and a heartbeat there. And so with everything, you never reach the end of that journey. There's always something that you'll go, that's still not working. There's effects now that I'm just like, it works, but there's something missing. And one day I'll find it. But just, yeah, it's a long journey.
Are you quite the critic of yourself then?
Oh, incredibly. Every show is post-mortemed, and I've received so many bad reviews over the years. Each one cuts to the heart, and you remember the bad reviews and not the good ones. But I think that's part of being a perfectionist. And also, I mean, I always say to my artist friends, I've got a very good friend, Shane Oakley, that's an incredible artist. He's his worst critic. His work's incredible, but he always tears into it. And I think it's the creative process. I think if you're creating something, then and you care, then you're going to be critical. The point when you stop criticising, the stop where you don't get nervous, the point where it doesn't faze you, I think that's the time to give up. Because it's like you don't care then. You know, getting nervous before you go on stage, you don't do it on purpose. It shows you're passionate about what you do. The fact that you get those butterflies, the fact that you come off at the end and it may have been almost perfect performance, but that one thing just nags you. I mean, I remember, my father's quite a critic. I remember doing a show with the cast of Coronation Street. We used to do a lot with them, and they used to bring guest artists in occasionally. There's this one, it was a big name, and the only people that knew was the big name, my team, and the show creatives. The cast didn't know who this special guest was. The audience didn't know who the special guest was, and we were effectively closing the first half and producing this guest who would do something. And we rehearsed it, we smuggled the guest in, we finished the act, and then the box was wheeled on, it was shown empty, it was spun round, close it, 1, 2, 3, bang, doors open, and there stood Peter Kay. Well, most of the show cast were in the wings, and they erupted because they didn't know. It's just, there's Peter Kay on the middle of the stage, oh my god. The audience went boom, you know, because this is a theatre show, at the point where he was top of his tree and about to do theatre tour, the stadium tours, and he, you know, the Phoenix Nights was massive and everything. And he came out, we did a bit of banter between us, and he did 20 minutes after that, and that was incredible. And I came off that stage just like, oh my god, that was brilliant. That was perfect. The magic had gone great. Everything had gone great. And I'd worked that Vanishing Radio on there. And I came off. My mum and dad were in the audience. And I was really pleased they were in the audience because it just felt great. And then after the show, my dad said, that cloth on the radio, it was a bit ski-whiff. That was the comment of the performance, you know.
That's your bubble.
Yeah, it's just straight back down to earth, you know.
Thanks, Dad.
So it's kind of, yeah, you've got to always care. And the other thing is, you don't know who's in the audience, you know. There may be, even if there's 2 people or 200 or 2,000 people in the audience, you don't ever know who's in the audience. There could be somebody not only influential, but we always think if you go out there, you know, we're doing something we enjoy, but also you're doing a good deed for the audience, because there may be someone in that audience with 101 problems, an incurable disease, money problems or something, if we take their mind off that for 5 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever, then we're doing a good job.
That's lovely. That really is lovely. Have there ever been times, though, where you've kind of been halfway through a performance and gone, I'm not feeling it tonight?
Yeah. There's times where I've got interest show and either it's just not gelled with the audience and we've died. Thankfully, not often, but a couple of times. We did an event, an Asian ball once, at the Commodore International in Nottingham. Oh God, we died on our arse that night. And there's other times that we've gone out there, and just from the first step on stage, I felt out of time, just not in time with myself. And there's been times where I thought, can we stop? And I just want to start again, but you can't. And there's times where I've been like a heartbeat behind, and just catching up that heartbeat's been almost impossible. Or it's just, things have just not worked right, or things have felt alien instead of comfortable. I think it helps, and it's happened less because of the amount of time that Alison and I have worked together. Because we've worked together so long now. I mean, there's one thing I do with a straitjacket escape, and I take the coat hanger off. I just literally hold the coat hanger behind me, and the coat hanger, people say, where does that coat hanger disappear to? It vanishes. No, it doesn't. Alison just takes it off me. But it's just so slick that people don't notice that she's just taken it off me. And I know she's going to be there. I can throw something behind me. She's caught it. It's there. It's gone. I've no worry that it's going to be missed. And so that helps with your performance. I've been very fortunate over the years that I've had a really great team around me. Alison as the head girl. There's Kelly, who's worked for me now since 1999. Chris, he works as roadie and sound technician, and that he's worked for me from 2001. But you look after people. If you treat the people that work for you with respect, and you're part of a family, it's like almost like a family unit, then the slickness is there, and that avoids too many points where it gets lumpy. It doesn't mean it's not ever going to happen, but it's making it okay. But the other trick is not letting the audience know. I mean, there was one job I did a golf club once years ago, and the organizer of the event was really mithery. He was really constantly coming to me and asking my advice about things that were nothing to do with me, about running this event. And it's just like, oh my God, this guy's driving me mad, but we're working for him, so I've got to try and help him. And for the first time ever, I set this effect, and the effect is a production, and I always set it. It goes into a case, what we call the brown case. The brown case is taken to the stage. We set the prop, and that's it. So this one night, we're halfway through the effect, and I come to this prop, and I'm walking to the table. Suddenly realise that one joining the journey of this prop, I'd set the prop. It had gone in the case. I'd brought the case to the backstage. I'd not set the prop on stage. So I had to walk to this table and go, I can't do the effect. It's not here. Oh my God. So I wheeled the table across the stage to Alison and said, skip to the next effect. She told the sound guy straight away. I walked forward to the middle of the stage and went, ta-da, put my arms out. And I got a round of applause for wheeling the table across the stage. And nobody questioned it. To this day, no one ever said, what was that about? You've wheeled a table across the stage and we gave you a round of applause. But again, it's like a few years ago, the International Brotherhood of Magicians, the president at the time, Alan Shaxson, who was ex-president of the Magic Circle, he wanted to do a tribute night to my mum and dad. And unfortunately, I mean, we'd known Alan for years from the 1960s through. Great performer, Alan and Anne. And he was taken ill, not very well at all, very seriously ill. He went to the event, but he couldn't do this tribute night. And he'd primed me up a few weeks before, look, I won't be able to do this. Could you do it? And he gave me a script, and it's like, I can't do your script, so we'll do it. And we put an afternoon on, and I spoke about my mum and dad's history. We showed some of the footage from the Van Buren story documentary. I spoke about the history and about the effects, and interspersed it with illusions throughout. And I told the story of Robert Harbin inventing an effect called Experiment 13, which was 13 wooden rods, and a girl stood in like a stocks, and the rods were shoved through all together as a bank. And he never liked the effect. And my dad and Robert Harbin were big friends. And my dad's, this is back in 73, 74, said, why don't you replace them with something else, like steel rods, or what about fluorescent light tubes? And Harbin said, I don't want to be bothered with that. You have got a great workshop. If you want to do it, you do it with my blessing. So my dad went away, and he came up with the way, bear in mind, this is 74, so electrics were a lot more basic then. My dad invented a fluorescent light tube that could be lit from one end, because they light from two ends. But he invented one that could be lit from one end, and then built this effect that was called the fluorescent light tube penetration. And my dad worked it, and the girl stands in, the fluorescent light tubes are lit, and they are pushed through, and they come through the front of the assistant. And beautiful effect, but very fragile. Built in 74. And my dad worked it for a good many years, and then, because of it being fragile, it was pensioned off. And I explained this to the audience, and I said the last time I worked it was when I had my own illusion show in Blackpool Tower Circus in 2007. And that was a grand illusion themed illusion show, biggest illusion show in the country for a good many years. Performed in the round, and that's the last time the fluorescent light tubes illusion was performed. And we don't perform it nowadays. And I told all this story, and they said, but for you today, we've brought it out of retirement and wheeled it on. And you know, that illusion, before it was even got to centre stage, got a round of applause. So it's just that showmanship and how you sell things that, it's, again, like I said earlier, it's the story.
Are there any effects that you would still like to do?
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, part of the one of the illusion shows that I bought up. I'm a bit, as you said, am I a collector, a hoarder? Yeah. I mean, look at this room. It's 12-foot ceilings, and it's stacked from floor to ceiling, and it's not a small room. I've got stuff stored all over the place as well. And one of the shows that I bought up, there was an illusion in there. There's a sideshow illusion, because I've got sideshows as well. And I want to recreate it. It's a variation of a levitation that was done as a sideshow. And I want to build that and bring that out and present it in my way. I've got the story already. I've got the presentation of it in my mind already. Just need to build the illusion. But it's such an intricate, cleverly built illusion that it's not a simple build. It's not a box or anything like that. So it's getting the time and energy to go for it and build that levitation. There's a few effects out there. There's effects that I'd love to perform, but I never will because they're other people's. It's like the floating light bulb. I just think that's magic. That's incredible. That's beautiful. When Harry Blackstone Jr. passed away, his wife Gay Blackstone then eventually gave the rights, I believe, to Hans Klok, the Dutch illusionist, who I think is a wonderful, wonderful performer. He's got a great size, fast, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. He spoofs himself. Just great performer. Got a lot of time for Hans. He's a good guy. So I believe he does I know he does the fluorescent floating light bulb now. Sorry, of Blackstone's. I will never do it because it's not mine to do. And I think, again, that goes back to the ethics of, like me with the plate spinning, I asked Wolfgang Barcelli, because he was the governor, that's what he did. I asked his permission, and he passed the mantle on to me. There's stuff I'd love to do, but I never will.
Where can people learn these little tricks, such as plate spinning?
Well, the thing with all of it, I mean, the circus skills of it, there's circus schools that will teach you things. But again, going back to the emphasis of magic, what I said about magic, where the emphasis is on how, I think that's the wrong emphasis. And again, with the circus skills, like, you can learn the skills. I mean, there's somebody now who's doing skills that I do, but not my words, but it's not the way I do it. And I tend to get the bigger reaction, and people tend to compare the two, and that's not good for either of us. But people wonder why mine gets a bigger reaction, and it's like other people working other effects. Why do their effects get bigger reactions than other people that have copied them? And it's because of the way they've done it. It's the part of them they've put into it. So you can copy something, but you're missing the soul. You're missing the heart of what makes it work for the audience. So I think it's great for people to go out and learn skills, and everyone needs to learn it, like the circus skills, etc., and the magic. But it's important to make it your own, and don't copy the skill. Isn't learning the method or the handling. The skill is learning the presentation, the performance, the story, the package, and the way you interact with it. That's the thing that people not very often learn.
You mentioned earlier on in the interview about doing the song sheet with a magic trick.
Yeah.
I've never seen that performed ever.
No, I mean, I don't know. That may have been done before by somebody, but I'm not aware of it. But when the producers of the show came talking to me, and they came and saw my outdoor show, and they commented on various aspects, and they loved the way I interacted. I mean, I'm not a children's entertainer, but I like to entertain the entire family. So I put something in for everybody. And the effect I did for children, it's a very visual card trick with large cards. It's like a rising cards effect, where the cards are chosen and come up, float up, the ones that have been chosen. But I have nothing to do with it. It's the children that do the effect. And it's the interplay that I have with the children is very song sheety. It's that thing of when the children are brought up and you ask them the names, etc., etc., etc. Well, I don't do any of the things you do in a song sheet, but it's got the same flavour. And it's a routine that I've written, and it's the timings of it I've come up with, and the things that happen in it, and the steering of the audience and the steering of the children into what the effect is very song sheet material. And so when I was talking to the producers of the show, and they said, we want to utilise you as much as possible, we joked about, well, why don't we do that as the song sheet? And they were like, yes, oh my god, that would work, that would be. And so that was it. It was literally just through joking about the idea, and we did it, and it really worked well, and it had got the flexibility to it where I could wait for the cue that everyone was dressed ready for the walk down, you know. And it just worked really well, and it was great because it made the children the stars. And I'm all about respecting the audience and making the audience feel they're part of the performance. And it's just beautiful, just seeing. There's a great story with this effect, because it's the three children with the cards and the one child that makes the magic happen. And I was asked to do a show locally for a church, and I went in and did it, donated my services, and I did this effect. And there was this pretty little girl that I brought up to make the magic happen, and the three other children. And she as the effect went along and she realised that she was making the magic happen, the smile was an incredible smile. And when it had finished, she thanked me. We gave them a gift at the end, and she thanked me. And they left the stage, and the people with the little girl were crying in the audience. And I just thought, oh, that's really nice, but what a strange reaction. And this is a really sad story, because afterwards they came to see me and spoke to me, and they said, thank you. And I said, why? They said, well, her father, a number of years ago, had shot his wife and then himself, and she'd not spoken since.
Oh.
And she'd not smiled since. And so for 2.5 years, she'd not spoken or smiled. And then she came on stage, and she left the stage having spoken and smiled. And that just proves how important what we do is to the audience, and how much we have to respect the audience. We owe such a debt to the audience, and people take that for granted.
That's beautiful. You must have felt very privileged that day.
It just shows what an incredible business we're in.
But you as a performer, though, that must have really touched you deeply.
It's a story that still makes me well up. It's a beautiful moment, and there's been a number of beautiful moments, and you think back on those, and that's what makes it worth doing. This business, it's wonderful. It opens the doors for us to meet stars and work with stars, and to mix and meet the royalty, and all the things that we've done, and great appearing on TV. But the things that mean something, that truly mean something, is when you've had a connection with an audience, and you may not even find out that minute. It may be years later. The people that have come to me, I've had somebody introduce me, and their introduction was about how they previously met me years before as a child, and I'd given them the time after the show, and my doing that had inspired them to go into the business. There's a juggler, theatrical impresario, Tom Rolfe, who I'm very proud of. I gave him the time, and I like to think that inspired him to pursue the career he's pursued, and to become successful in what he does as a theatrical producer. You should always have time for people. But I'm a great believer in giving to the new generation, and in supporting and helping the next generation. But I don't like it if they consider that they can just take. And that upsets me when people take. They can be given to, and there's a number that I've given to, but there's a couple that have taken it upon themselves to take, and that makes me sad.
Apart from Mum and Dad, who has been really helpful in the business to you?
Oh, there's been so many. I mean, a pet hate of mine is when people say, oh, I've done it all myself. No one's done it themselves. From the early days, the guy that taught me the banjo, my Uncle Tom, which I can't play for toffee now. It's gone because I've spent more time learning other things along the way. Windsor Davies just had the time for me. Bob Andrews, there was a comedian, Bob Andrews, who was a fellow water rat. He taught me to play chess. He taught me to swim. He talked to me about the water rats. I was 6. That year when I was 6, there was one of the stage crew used to sit on the wicker basket backstage, and she was a teacher by day and stage crew by night. And she used to read A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh to me and help me with the reading. There was people that have taught me the ways of pulling the tabs and such like. The skills wise, Csaba Schlingoff, that Hungarian circus artist who taught me the trick cycling. Wolfgang Barcelli, who gave me the permission to do the plate spinning. Johnny Stafford, who taught me the Rolling Globe. There's a guy, David Barnes. I mean, what a guy. He was like a second father to me. David and his wife Janet, I used to go and stay with them. I mean, David was one of those people. He worked for Westminster Council, but also loved show business. And he loved magic, and he loved circus. And he was in a great position. I mean, basically, any royal event in London, he was behind. He was big friends with Major Michael Parker, who ran the Royal Tournament. I mean, there's a great story of Major Michael Parker, David Barnes, and a certain, now getting on a little bit, aged member of the royal family. The three of them flew over to America together, and there was a security announcement in America that they wouldn't be able to get off the plane for an hour. Because of security. It wasn't security, they needed to sober them up. But David was great. I mean, it was David and Major Michael Parker who sent me over to Seville in Spain to represent Great Britain at World Expo 92, which is when I did my first royal show, which was for Prince Charles and Princess Diana, which was great meeting them. And that was the first time I was televised live. That was a live broadcast on Blue Peter via satellite. That was the first Blue Peter via satellite. So David was a massive influence. He helped me with the way that I speak on stage and the timing of delivering a line. And David was great with that. Comedy, people like Nicky Martin has given me lines over the years. Johnny Casson, just working alongside Johnny has taught me so much. Impresarios like Dougie Chapman on the business side of things. There's too many to list. There's so many people that have helped me in so many ways, and I always try to thank and acknowledge all of them. Max Blake, he taught me the escapology, which is a great part of what I do now, and Max now is still around, and he's a great advisor for the history of magic. I can't list everybody. There's been so many on so many aspects. I feel very fortunate that I've had such generous people in my life that have helped me in such amazing ways along the way.
Have you written your memoirs yet?
I keep a diary, which there's a lot of it in there.
It sounds it.
Yeah.
How many passports do you have to have? That's the thing, because I bet you run out of pages, don't you?
Yeah, it has been like that. I mean, I'm trying to spend more time in the UK nowadays because of looking after my family, also with my daughter, keeping my eye on my dad. And we spent so much time abroad, like all the cruise ships. I mean, there was one point in time that I flew back to this country and I was doing a show in Blackpool, realising that at the point of time I was on stage in Blackpool doing 45 minutes, I'd got a cruise ship show on the Aurora, P&O cruise ship Aurora, coming north through the Suez Canal. At the same time, passing it was my 2-hour illusion show going to the Middle East. So it's like I've got like 4.5 hours worth of equipment at sea on 2 different ships while I'm doing a 45-minute show here in Blackpool at this precise moment. And you just think, oh my God, the things we've done and the tours and working, like touring Sweden and France and Germany, like working the Rhine Summer Show in Germany to an audience of 400,000 people. That's a big audience, Status Quo were headlining in that. Working Glastonbury, working the Brit Awards. That was great. We themed an illusion show around like a ghost train for the Brit Awards. That was incredible. Having Muhammad Ali walk past you just in the corridor. Just one of those moments where you just think, there's greatness, There's so many stories to tell, yeah. But the part of my mum and dad's story has been documented with the Van Buren story DVD, there's a little bit of my story on there. But yeah.
Pen to paper.
Yeah.
How's lockdown been then? Because you've gone from busy through, like everybody, to zero.
It's been bonkers because, 2018 was insane with my Philip Astley project work, and I came out of that wanting to continue the Philip Astley project, which is great because I've got a great committee working on that, and there's a lot of people that want to continue it on the global scale. Over in Monte Carlo, they want to retain the connections from that. I'm on the committee of the Big Top Label Award system, which comes from the European Parliament, which is like a Michelin star system. I'm on the committee of that. We've got a steampunk festival that we're working on. I'm constantly writing ideas and that. Got a lot of connections with Brazil at the moment, with the University of Bahia, Brazil. And advising on films over there, like behind the scene films and such like. I've done quite a bit of work with them this year. And a friend of mine, Professor Ellen in Belichia, I'm doing a lot with the education service, but the higher education side. So there's a lot of that going on. And with my own shows, I mean, yeah, we had a busy outdoor show season. We had TV work lined up. We had cabaret work lined up. There was a lot of things, and then suddenly it all ground to a standstill. But a lot of people have said that this year has been a great loss. For me, it's been a massive gain because, you know, my life is pretty full. I mean, I don't get much sleep. People say, how do you fit it so much in? Well, I get up early, I go to bed late, and I don't sleep much in between. You know, constantly note papers next to my bed, and I'm an absolute nightmare to be around, really. But, you know, my mum was taken ill right at the start of lockdown, and cutting a long story short, she was in hospital very, very seriously ill. She was brought back to life. She died. And if it wasn't for lockdown, I would have been away working a lot for the last 4 months. Sadly, my mum passed away at the end of the 4 months, but that 4 months was a gift. You know, I got to spend more time with my family, with my mum and dad, with my daughter Harley, and with Alison, who works with me anyway. But just as a family unit, was incredible. So that's an amazing gift of that time. It's given me time to catch up with my health, with my thinking and my thoughts and my priorities. It's given me time to find out who's who in my life, who my friends are, and who are just there. It's allowed me time to help other people and reassess and make plans for the future. And with my mum's passing, it's given me time to arrange a funeral, and it's given me time to be here to support my father and just get him on a right path for the future as well. So even though my diary has been wiped out from my last job was a lecture. I was giving a lecture because I do a lecture on my life in the business, and I do a lecture on the Philip Astley project and Philip Astley's life. My last job was the 11th of March this year, 2020, on Philip Astley, and my next job at the moment is Chinese New Year in 2021. So that's a massive stretch of time, but you know what? That's okay. That's all right, because it's been a gift this year. You know, it's given me a chance to catch up. Next year, yeah, I want to get back on the stage. I want to get back out there. I miss the audience. Really miss the audience. And I feel I'm not quite as slick as I would be even at this, just a conversation, interview. But it's been an important year, and it's incredibly sad with the amount of illness, the amount of deaths. But on a selfish, personal level, it's been a gift. But next year, I want to get performing again. So I hope that the inoculation comes along and the cure that will make it possible for people to actually physically touch again. This is so alien. And I don't want my daughter growing up in a world where everyone's wearing masks. I mean, you know, if 12 months ago you'd gone in a shop with a mask on, they'd phone the police. Now if you go in a shop with a mask on, if you don't have the mask on, they phone the police. It's crazy. The world's changed so much. So I don't want my daughter growing up in that environment where you can't hug somebody and you can't shake hands and you can't see somebody smile. So I want us back to normal again. But for me, let's make the most of life and family and people and friends this year, and then let's get on with the business next year.
Are you looking forward to Christmas at home?
Yeah, it's going to be very strange with it being the first one without my mum. That's incredibly strange, and it caught me on my birthday getting a card off my dad instead of my mum, and my mum's name not being on it. So that's the downside. But I'm very philosophical, and if we've all got to go at some point in time, and this year, yeah, it's too soon, but it's been a good year to go for my mum because we were all here and I wasn't off performing, so we could spend time together. Christmas is going to be hard. We're going to make it all about my daughter, because it should be for the children, and it should be about family, and it should be about friends. So it's going to be, hopefully, touch wood, a great kind of rounding off of the year to celebrate people. And then, as I say, my next year is my annual run of Chinese New Year work. So that'll be a nice, hopefully if it happens, that'll be a nice way back in. So I just hope that by the end of January we can be a little bit back to normal.
Will you still fill your diary up as much as the work was?
I may pick and choose a little. I mean, for a long time now, I have this thing of being fair to the client and being fair to the audience. And I have a mental block of people becoming kind of greedy around their work. We all need to earn what we can, and we all need to work as much as we can. But you also have to put a little bit back in. It's like with the magic fraternity. For a number of years now, I've only ever allowed myself to do 2 shows for the magic fraternity per year. Because quite often you'll get the same people going to the same dinnerings or conventions, and they'll have seen the same acts 3 or 4 times. Well, I don't think that's fair. So I've affected my pocket, but kept my heart true by limiting it to 2 a year as a maximum. Some years I never work for a magic audience. Sometimes it'll be 1, sometimes it'll be 2, but never more. And that's fair to the client, it's fair to the audience. It's the same if somebody contacts me about a close-up show. I won't do it because I'm not good enough at close-up magic. I can do it, but there's people better than me, so I'll give it to them. Where are you from? So-and-so in your area is the governor of that in your area. This is their number. Phone them. They'll do a better job than me. If you want illusions, or you want a plate spinner, or circus skills, yeah, come and talk to me. If you want somebody to stand on stage and waffle on and entertain an audience forever, yeah, I'll do that. That's for me. But, yeah, so I have for a long time picked and choose. And that's why I do some of the projects that I do, because it's something I've created from nothing. It's something that's been built. And it's always been a way of bringing people together, working together, as a way of people benefiting and kind of learning and developing relationships. And then when I step away, if on some things I step away, some things I don't, then it's nice to look back and see that you've put these people together and they're working together ongoing. So that's quite a nice legacy to leave behind. So I'll probably end up being a workaholic again. But it'd be nice if it's the jobs I want to do. And the jobs that I feel I've got not just a monetary value. You know, that's what I enjoy. I enjoy creating. The H.G. Wells Fest project that's bubbling with a friend of mine, I'd like to see that to great levels. There's a few other projects that I'd like to see, I'd like to develop further, that I've got bubbling along, and I'd like to continue. And I've had a meeting today, a Zoom meeting about the Philip Astley project. So there's great things bubbling about that for the future. not just in this country. So I'd like to pursue the things that allow me a family life, but still be the performer, because that's who I am. I don't like having an audience taken away from me. I like an audience there, as we all do.
Well, this leads me on to my last question.
Yes.
Your dream panto. So you can be in it. You could use the production. You could be sitting in the stalls watching it if you want to, and your cast could be a mixture of alive or dead.
Wow. I think Cinderella holds a soft spot for me, because that's probably the one I've done the most times, and it's always been great fun. I've worked out with a great mix of great acts and great celebrities over the years. I think I'd have to be in it. I'm too much of a ham to sit in the audience and watch someone else doing it. So I think I'd like to be in a wonderful production of Cinderella with all of the bells and whistles. Traditional production. Cast-wise, how do you say this without alienating and upsetting people? That's really difficult. I've had great fun working with a lot of people. Gina and Curly Carter and Gina Millington as Ugly Sisters have been great fun. There's two others, Taz and Jamie. They were great fun to work with as Ugly Sisters. Can we have 4 Ugly Sisters?
You can.
Why not?
It's your panto.
We'll have 4 Ugly Sisters. Sherry Hewson was a dream to work with on the TV work. Sherry from Loose Women and Benidorm and that. I think she'd make a great kind of Baroness mother to the Ugly Sisters. She'd be great for that. Johnny Casson, I adore, the comedian. He'd be a great Baron. God, how could we get Danny LaRue in there? I had 3 years touring with Danny. Danny was great just for his stories. Fairy Godmother, Danny LaRue. Perfect. Yeah, I love him just for his sayings. I'm a racehorse surrounded by donkeys. No. So many Danny LaRue comments. Keith Simmons, Alan Simmons, Ben Simmons. Can we have them as like the Brokers Men, maybe? The 3 of them. Let's put the 3 of them together. The Simmons brothers and son. God, yeah. There's too many people I'd want in it. It'd be a cast of thousands.
The venue, then.
The venue. Oh, do you know, there's a venue I've always wanted to play. It's the last on my bucket list. I've worked the Royal Albert Hall. I've worked Blackpool Tower Circus. I've toured all over the world. All of the main places like your Birmingham Hippodromes, your Bristol Hippodromes, all of them I've worked. Worked the West End. I've never worked the Palladium. So I'd put it in the Palladium, because then I can say I've stood on and worked on the Palladium stage. That would mean the world to me. That'd scarily, probably venue-wise, tick the last of my bucket list. I mean, the Royal Albert Hall was great to work. That was for somebody's 21st birthday. That was a birthday party, the Royal Albert Hall was. They took over the Royal Albert Hall, yeah. That was massive. So, yeah, put it in the Palladium.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for telling your stories to the Panto podcast.
That's okay. Even I'm fed up with me now.
Cheers.